One day we may be able to forgive them for killing Israeli children. We will never be able to forgive them for making us kill their children. Israel doesn't do that. Israel is the most ethical army in the nation.
God's chosen people. Ask any Christian in the West why they fully back Israel in the occupation and massacre of the Palestinians, and they'll undoubtedly use this phrase. You know, God's chosen people, the ones that established a secular government, occupying the Palestinians, murdering 10,000 of their children in 4 months. You can't make this shit up. But what I believe isn't so hopeless is dispelling the absolute motherload of bullshit propaganda coming from the so-called chosen people of Israel.
Babies, their heads cut off. That's what they said.
Wolves in sheep's clothing, or rather Zionist and Jewish clothing. Not only is there a difference, but they're polar opposites.
We believe strongly that the state of Israel will come to an end. We have God on our side.
Before we get into the weeds of trying to understand how the Israeli state manipulates the world to support their crimes, we need to start from square one. What is a Jew?
If you could just give us what you are saying the current definition of anti-Semitism is today, that would be very helpful.
The current definition of anti-Semitism today has to do with what feelings are. I would hope that you understand a history and an understanding that we define what anti-Semitism is.
The reason most churches are supporting Israel's bloody and Christ-hating regime is because they can't properly answer this question. What is a Jew? There's major cognitive dissonance with most people with trying to understand this question.
The definition of a Jew is it's a religion, job description given by God. We are only a people, because of our faith, are obligated to fulfill these commandments. Zionist plan was to change the definition of a Jew to a nationality.
We've been told that it's a religion and an ethnicity and a race, and we're just supposed to accept this dichotomy that makes no sense. This is the lie that all the other lies are built on. The Jewish people being an ethnicity was completely unheard of until somewhere around the 1700s. It's an idea that was completely invented by the Zionist movement. But to understand this, we need to do a little history lesson. Since Rome reclaimed Jerusalem and destroyed the Second Temple in 70 AD, the Jewish people fled their homeland and they took refuge in Europe, especially Eastern Europe, where there's still a thriving community to this day. But they also went to North Africa, different parts of the Middle East. They even went as far as India. That's the reason you have Sephardic Jews, Mizrahi Jews, Ashkenazi. You're going to have all these little independent groups of Jewish people. These groups of Jews were separated by language, cultural influence, genetic makeup for like around 2,000 years. And most importantly, they never viewed themselves as a nation. According to the Jewish tradition, when God gave Moses the 613 laws on Mount Sinai, he didn't give those laws to a nation of people. And the reason they got it was because God was and still is willing to give it to anybody that accepts it. This is Jewish tradition. There were converts to Judaism in the Torah. How do you convert to an ethnicity?
A Jew is not a race. They are Jews of all races. There are black Jews and white Jews, brown Jews. A Jew is not an ethnicity. There are Jews of all sorts of ethnicities. Makes no sense to say that the Ethiopian Jews and the Yemenite Jews are of the same ethnicity as the German and Russian Jews. It also makes no sense to say that you can convert to an ethnicity even though you can convert to Judaism. Considering what the definition of a Jew is, it depends on Torah law. Whoever the Torah says is obligated in the commandments is a Jew. If you convert, you're Jewish, and conversion means to accept these 613 commandments. And once you convert to Judaism, you cannot convert out of Judaism.
There's multiple layers we're going to have to peel back to understand how a religion became a nation in a bloody political ideology. Let's start with the so-called Star of David, also referred to as David's Shield. In reality, anybody that's done any research into ancient mystery schools will instantly recognize it as a Kabbalistic symbol. It's a symbol that could be traced back to the ancient occult traditions, and it's a symbol used by Rosicrucians, Freemasons, and all kinds of secret societies. You're probably wondering, how the hell did an occult symbol end up on their flag? Well, this is where it gets interesting. 500 years before the last destruction of the Jewish temple by Rome, the Babylonians also invaded and took over Israel and also destroyed their temple. Majority of the Israelites were conquered and taken into captivity for 70 years. Others did manage to flee. It's during this captivity that certain Jews were heavily influenced by the occult traditions in Babylon. Babylon is viewed as the birthplace of mystery schools that eventually led to secret societies like the Freemasons, which flourish in subversion. When the Assyrians conquered Babylon, they released the Jewish people back to their homeland. The Kabbalists were returning home, but now with a mystery school of their own.
The astronomer priests of ancient Babylon predates and was later adopted into Jewish mysticism, which was then integrated, encoded, and disseminated into other religions around the world after the Jews were freed from captivity by Cyrus the Great during the 6th century BC.
Of course, this was all practiced and taught in private. It would be completely against Jewish law, so they had to do it in secret. Fast forward to the second destruction of the temple by Romans in Israel. The Jewish people fled and were scattered throughout various nations, but the Kabbalistic teachings were preserved through secrecy and occult tradition. This resulted in a hijacking of the faith by an influx of these deceivers into the Jewish community. This influx began shifting the idea of what it meant to be a Jew.
The Zionists had to convince the Jews that you are not what you think you are. You are not the Mamleches Kohanim v'Goy Kodesh. You are not a people who are enjoined by God to fulfill this religion, these religious laws. You are a nation. You need a language, you need a flag, you need a country, because Jews didn't share a language for 2,000 years. The only thing that united us into being a people is our Torah, our faith.
Sabbatai Zevi was a Kabbalist and fake Jewish messiah that emerged in the 1600s. And surprisingly, very little people know about him, considering the fact that millions of Jews, roughly half the world's Jewish population at the time, followed this man. Jewish identity crisis started with this man.
But very few have ever heard of Sabbatai Zevi, who declared himself the Messiah in 1666. By proclaiming redemption was available through acts of sin, he amassed a following of over 1 million passionate believers, despite being banished by local rabbis several times and causing shock and outrage amongst Orthodox Jewish leaders. He and his charismatic wife gained a large following.
Zevi was later succeeded by another Kabbalist, Jacob Frank. Jacob Frank, along with A.M. Rothschild and Adam Weishaupt, who was the governor of Austria, are the originators of the Illuminati. And guys, these are not conspiracy theories. Adam Weishaupt actually wrote a book called The Order of the Illuminati, where he detailed these meetings. He explains that the Illuminati, along with other mystery schools, each find their origin in Kabbalistic teachings. And Jacob was finally succeeded by Kabbalist Moses Mendelssohn, who was the father of secular Judaism. These were the early Zionists, and they hated religious Jews. Understanding the mind state of the Jewish people during the time is pivotal in understanding how they were enticed by all these occultists and con men. The Jewish community, like all other religions at some point, were discriminated against. The majority of the world were either Christian or Muslims, and it was extremely difficult for the Jews to acclimate to society. Some opted to go live separately in ghettos, but the majority were forced. They struggled to find work, and many were forced into usury, a tradition that still persists to this day. On one hand, they were told that they were God's chosen people, a people set apart. But on the other hand, they were at the lowest rung of the social hierarchy. This resulted in a major identity crisis with the Jews, which made the Zionist movement that much more appealing. What would heal the Jews' identity crisis and bring them together like a brand new nationalistic mentality? A land they could call their own. Sure, it was contrary to the Judeo worldview, but many were willing to look past it. Theodore Herzl, the father of the officially branded Zionism, despised religious Jews. He despised them.
These are some of the things that this con artist was quoted saying. If whole branches of Jews must be destroyed, it is worth it, as long as a Jewish state in Palestine is created. The Jewish people were always a means to an end for the Zionist political movement. And if that quote was a little too vague, he also said this: "It is essential that the suffering of the Jews becomes worse. This will assist in the realization of our plans. I have an excellent idea. I shall induce the anti-Semites to liquidate Jewish wealth. The anti-Semites will assist us thereby in that they will strengthen the persecution and oppression of the Jews. The anti-Semites shall be our best friends." Theodore Herzl. These Zionists aren't and never were the friends of the Jews.
One major part of history that is easily provable, yet nobody knows about it, is the fact that while Jews around the world were boycotting Hitler for his atrocities done to their people, the Zionist Jews were working with Hitler behind the scenes to establish an Israeli state in Palestine. It's an easily verifiable fact, and many historians are completely baffled considering the fact that the Zionists still established their state after the Second World War with the help of the UN. It shows that these demons will happily play both sides. The Jewish community is nothing but a means to an end for them. The Zionists finally achieved their goals in May 14th, 1948.
By the time Britain ended its mandate on May 15, 1948, 250,000 Palestinians had fled. The night before, David Ben-Gurion announced the founding of the State of Israel. He was standing under a giant portrait of Herzl, 51 years after Herzl had predicted this very moment.
And most people around the world were completely supportive of this, considering the things that happened during the Second World War. Little did they know, but they opened Pandora's box by allowing it to happen. The Zionists expectedly filled all these positions of power, and they established the furthest thing from what Judaism actually stands for. They immediately expanded into Palestinian territory, killing tens of thousands, displacing hundreds of thousands. By the end of their conquest, they took 80% of the land of the former Mandatory Palestine. Although the Zionists began political turmoil in the Middle East upon their arrival, this was not the first time that they caused political turmoil through revolutions and government overthrows throughout history. Dennis Prager, a Christian Jew, has even admitted that the Jews have been involved in pretty much every major revolution in recent history. The Bolshevik Revolution, the French Revolution, and even civil rights movements like LGBTQ+, and in my opinion, stuff like Black Lives Matter as well. Michael E. Jones actually writes an extremely detailed book on this topic. If you're interested, it's called The Jewish Revolutionary Spirit. Like I mentioned earlier, this Zionist infiltration into every part of society was by no means a new thing. When Jacob Frank, along with Weishaupt, established the Illuminati, it was no short-sighted goal. They understood that to steer the ship of society, they not only needed to affect the minds of the Jewish people, but they would also need to infiltrate the highest levels of society to affect public opinion. And despite what many people would tell you, it doesn't take a lot of research to verify the fact that Jews did infiltrate Hollywood. They did infiltrate the Federal Reserve, politics. But to sustain this power and to achieve their goals, they would need to use the strongest tool at their disposal, which is social shame and confusion. There is no better example of these tactics being done than Candace Owens' interview with Rabbi Barclay. Candace Owens, as some of you probably know, has been questioning a lot of this Zionist rhetoric. And Rabbi Barclay comes to the rescue to attempt to control the narrative and to shame and guilt trip Candace into agreeing with him. Check it out.
If you could just give us what you are saying the current definition of anti-Semitism is today, that would be very helpful.
The current definition of anti-Semitism today has to do with what feelings are. I would hope that you understand a history and an understanding that we define what anti-Semitism is. You have the anti-Semitic myth of Jews have horns and they drink blood. And I know people who've been asked when they went into the army and other places, can I see your horns? So this still exists today in 2024 throughout America. And I don't mean just in little rural areas. It exists today, these myths.
I definitely didn't know that some of you Christians assume that Jews have horns on their head.
Do you ever intend to hurt or want to hurt anyone based on their race, religion, theology, color, etc.?
No.
You don't know what a rabbi does. You don't know our theology. How dare you call him an unholy rabbi? How dare you go into the misogynistic, the anti-Semitic trope of his hag daughter, something used throughout the late 18th and early through the early 20th century.
Sorry. Hag is now anti-Semitic?
So that is a term of his hag daughter that goes back into the witches of Eastern Europe. Why did you have to call her a hag daughter?
Just to be clear, because she's a witch.
The whole purpose of this interview was to make Candace fold under the pressure of the anti-Semitic accusation.
First thing you say is that this is a woman who is such an anti-Semite and so ignorant of history that in 2018, she publicly said that Hitler was okay. Do you actually, we have the clip, so we're going to play it. So again, the question that's being asked of me is whether or not nationalism is an okay word to embrace. Let's play the clip so we can hear me and what I actually said.
When you think about, whenever we say nationalism, the first thing people think about, at least in America, is Hitler. You know, he was a National Socialist. But if Hitler just wanted to make Germany great and have things run well, okay, fine. The problem is that he had dreams outside of Germany. He wanted to globalize. He wanted everybody to be German, everybody to be speaking German, everybody to look a different way. That's not, to me, that's not nationalism.
Why bring one of the most evil men of history into the discussion? You could just as easily have given any negative examples of nationalism.
After watching that in context, do you think it is fair that you wrote, she publicly said that Hitler was okay? Hitler was okay.
Yeah. Yes, by bringing me even into the conversation, yes, I do.
Okay.
Using Hitler as a historical reference is anti-Semitic. Everything is anti-Semitic in these people's eyes.
I don't know how you could write this statement, she refused to condemn Hamas, when I literally said who would not condemn these horrific events.
You don't condemn them uniquely evil. You put them in pari passu relationship.
So you're saying that even though I did, so now you're admitting that I did condemn Hamas.
I cry for what's going on in Israel. I cry just as much for what we are forced to do. One day we may be able to forgive them for killing Israeli children. We will never be able to forgive them for making us kill their children.
This dude is delusional and he thinks we're retarded. Guys, there is no winning with these people. You either agree full-heartedly or you're an anti-Semite. Ben Shapiro, the little weasel, used to be the America First guy. You remember that? He used to be the facts don't care about your feelings guy. I guess that all goes out the window for him if it has to do with Israel. He is more than willing to let America go into a recession as long as we keep supporting these wars in the Middle East. Our interest should be America first, everything else second. Guys, thank you for making it this far into the video. I truly appreciate it. I am attempting to up the quality of these videos for you guys, keep you engaged. If there's any part of the video you want me to go into deeper detail in, I'll do some research and I'll put out a video for you guys. Just let me know in the comments. As always, much love, God bless, and I'll see you next time on DimaTalks.